Animals, especially domestic pets, are well loved by people. No animal lover would disagree that they have dreamed to take care of all the animals they could see. However, what if it's wild animal? Wild animals are, of course, meant to grow in the wild, but what if you've accidentally stumbled upon them in front of your house? Once upon a sunny day, somewhere in the sunny forests of Lithuania, there was a humble farm owner named Erikas Plukas who unexpectedly stumbled upon something he never expected all his life. Plukas was one of the few people who chose to live in the serene, quiet, and comfortable countryside instead of lurking around in the bustling and noisy streets of the city. He was perfectly contented and happy with the simple life he had. Plukas wasn't expecting and does not ask more in his life. However, how can he say no to this one? Just like any other day, Plukas was heading home from work and was literally not expecting any visitors. Thus, he was completely shocked when he saw who's waiting for him. It never occurred to him that he'd be able to meet someone like her. He was totally stunned. Lying on the front gate was a young baby moose. Plukas admits that there are many wild animals like moose lurking around this area, but this was the first time that he got the chance to see it up close. And with one look, something bothered him. As Plukas got near the baby moose slowly, he realized something. Moose are wild animals and very territorial, and its mother might be around his area. Assessing the situation, he decided to look all over the place and see if he could find the baby moose's mother. After searching the area, he concluded that the baby moose was all alone. He admitted that he might be living near the forests and the wild, but he's not really well educated about this wild animal. But based on his observation, the calf was still young, not even 2 weeks old, and yet she looked very wary and helpless. He arrived to a conclusion. It must be hunters. That was the very first thing Plukas could think of. Hunters must have killed the calf's mother, and the baby moose had no other choice but to run and escape. But because of exhaustion and the injuries, she ended up on Plukas's front door. The first time Plukas saw the poor calf, he was stunned by its image. She looked so helpless and lonely. It was a very moving scene. He couldn't feel anything but pity for the unfortunate baby moose. The first sight of her was heartbreaking. After putting all the pieces together and getting a hold of the situation, Plukas knew that the calf was still unsafe. She was badly injured, helpless, and she must have also been traumatized. He knew she needed his help. With everything happening to him that afternoon, he didn't think about anything for a second and just did what his heart said. Plukas carried the calf inside his house to mend her and make sure she was safe from any kind of harm, and all the predators that must have been waiting to devour her. The baby moose looked very unwell. She was covered in blood and there were flies buzzing around her fresh wounds. She was completely filthy, but Plukas didn't have any second thoughts as he scooped the calf in his arms and carried her inside his house. She was starved, dirty, sad, and her fur was infested with flies, he said. However, as he put her down, he realized something. He didn't know anything about taking care of an animal and specifically treating a wound. It was a very on-the-spot decision, and he just followed his instincts without really knowing. Now he thought of the best thing to do. His mind was still in chaos, and all he could think of in that moment was to ask for help. Plukas immediately grabbed his phone to dial his friend's number and to get some advice or a bit of help. However, he didn't expect all of their responses. All of his friends had negative responses about what he'd done, and instead of offering help, they threw a lot of questions. "It's illegal, you shouldn't do it. Let nature take care of it. What are you thinking?" And because of that, he had no other choice but to take another call. With all of his friends' reactions, Plukas had no other choice but to call for animal services for immediate help. The baby calf started to look worse every minute and he began to panic. He waited impatiently until someone answered the other line. A staff member from Animal Services answered Plukas's call. However, he was only greeted by an unexpected response. The staff explained that there were a lot of things happening that day and no one could help him at the moment. They asked him to take care of the poor baby moose until the next day, and he felt nothing but scared. Plukas basically didn't know where to start. He didn't know how to take care of an animal, especially a wild one, but he thought she must be hungry and prepared her some food. He got some milk and leaves and left it in front of her to eat. As she was eating, he couldn't help but smile. At least she was eating. She'll be okay soon, that's what he thought. He left her with the food and made himself busy as he set up a makeshift shelter for her until animal services arrived the next day. He was sincerely looking forward to their help. Plukas wished the time would immediately pass and the next day would come, as he thought animal services would come and rescue the poor baby moose and give the help she needs. Plukas almost didn't sleep at all that night and waited the day. The staff came and he couldn't be more relieved. However, he was greeted by another unexpected announcement. They couldn't take her and couldn't help him. Instead, they offered him a solution which left his mind blank and his jaw hanging. He never thought that instead of helping him, animal services suggested a much worse solution to his complicated situation. Animal services told him to call the local hunters as they would know what to do with the unfortunate young moose. He could only think of one thing to do. Plukas got what they meant and he would never let it happen. He'll never let the people who might have killed the calf's mother actually get her custody and even suffer the same fate. Taking care of wild animals and keeping them is illegal, and Plukas was very aware of the fact, but he could never hand the young calf over to the hunters. He might be getting a little attached to the baby calf, but he didn't know it yet. All that he knew was that he'd never let this calf suffer again. Whether or not they were the hunters who killed her mother, Plukas believed that hunters have a cruel way of handling wild animals, and the baby moose was no exception. He had to make a decision and fight for it. Plukas declined calling the local hunters and asked the animal services to give her the baby moose's custody. He told them that he would rather nurse the poor calf himself than to give her to the cruel hands of the hunters. It resulted in a long argument. They reminded him of the true dangers of a wild animal and how much it was illegal. However, Plukas was firm. He never backed down until the animal services let him do what he wanted. Animal services gave Plukas the right to take care of the baby moose. Technically, Plukas was just given the right to nurse the baby moose. However, he felt as if he became a real father with an adopted child. And because of this, he thought it would be nice to give her a name. Not long after, he decided he would call her Emma. Plukas thought that choosing a name would actually be hard, but as each day passed by, he realized that the easiest thing he'd ever done was that, because feeding her and making sure she was fine was an everyday challenge for him. Plukas was definitely taking care of his daughter quite well. He was giving her all the attention she needed, and along the way, he saw that Emma appreciated all his efforts. Emma started to become really comfortable with her father, and they missed each other every single time they needed to part. Plukas couldn't deny the fact that he and Emma absolutely made a beautiful father-daughter bond. Emma didn't only feel safe with her father around, but she also felt loved. Plukas, on the other hand, couldn't be happier since he met Emma. He found a family. Plukas never thought that being close to one another could also be a problem, but Emma never feels safe without him around, and so he came up with something that people may have never thought of before: a sleeping arrangement. As a wild animal, many people might have thought that Emma was staying outside Plukas's barn at night while the latter enjoyed his bed inside his house. But you're wrong. Why would a father leave his daughter outside all alone? Plukas sleeps where Emma wants to sleep, sometimes inside the barn and sometimes out in the open. Makes sense, right? She was afraid of everything but me, he said. No matter how much the two are happily living together, Plukas was well aware of the fact that the wild is still Emma's real home, and one day she needed to go back from where she really came. Thus, Plukas exerted great effort in helping her adjust to nature's surroundings. Plukas knew that Emma once suffered a traumatic experience in the forest, and though it's the place where she was born and spent a few days with her mother, he knew that it would be really hard for his daughter, but necessary. Thus, Plukas tried to take her into the forest. He was expecting it, but he couldn't help feel sad every single time he saw Emma's petrified face when they went into the forest. However, after several trips, Plukas saw that she was starting to adapt and feel at ease. As she walked by her father's side, Emma felt comfortable strolling through the forest while Plukas taught her what was safe and what was not. Plukas was really happy to see that Emma was finally enjoying nature, her true home. Aside from teaching her the basic safety about the forest, Plukas also taught her the #1 rule to survive: how to hunt for food. As she began eating inside the forest, Plukas could see that Emma was finally enjoying being in her real home. After several trips with her father, one day, Emma finally had gone into the forest all by herself. With her father's help, she was able to grow up and gain this much courage and confidence to go on her own and experience the wild without anyone's guidance. Her little adventure to the forest was not her last one. Emma started to get excited and always went out the whole day, only to return home when the sun set. Plukas was very happy that at last his daughter knew she was actually belonging there. Still, there were times when he felt a little sad and worried about her safety. Until a very odd day came, Plukas didn't want to panic. He wanted to think this was just another late-night adventure of his daughter, but he couldn't stop himself from worrying. Different conclusions ran through his head. He was worried Emma might have gotten lost, gotten into a fight with other animals, or worse, she might have been found by hunters. He spent all night waiting for Emma, but she never came. Emma didn't come back for several days. Plukas spent countless sleepless nights waiting for her until Plukas realized something. Emma was now a fully grown moose, and this was the time to finally let her go. He reminded himself not to think of the negative things that could happen to her. However, his heart took over his mind. Aside from worrying about her, Plukas also found himself missing her too much. But he remembered his sole purpose of nursing her, letting her grow. I remember those first nights she didn't come home. Oh, I barely slept. But she grew up. I had to get over it. After all, it was my goal from the very beginning. Plukas was starting to move on and accept that his daughter really found the place she belonged to. She didn't leave him, but she just successfully grew into what exactly he dreamed for her. He missed her, but it's part of growing up. All he could do was remember all the times they were together. But one day, he thought he was dreaming. Emma was right in front of the house again. He couldn't believe that she came back for him. He couldn't be happier to see that his daughter missed him too and that she grew up really well. Plukas enjoyed that day because he thought it may never happen again. But he was wrong. He never thought his daughter could make him this happy. The next day, Emma visited her father again. Plukas was very happy to find her waiting for him to wake up in front of his doorstep. Days passed like that. It can be truly seen that the two are happy spending time together, playing, swimming, and doing all they want. They have a bond that even words couldn't fathom. They're father and daughter, but they're also absolute best friends. Plukas' family and friends, however, couldn't do anything but throw them weird looks. Because Emma was a wild moose, although they can perfectly see his billion-dollar smile every time he's with his daughter, his family couldn't erase their worries. However, Plukas assured them that he was okay and he was the happiest when he was with her. To me, she's gentle and loving. She's very careful when we're playing so she wouldn't hurt me. Plukas was perfectly aware that his daughter was a fully grown moose, the main reason he's getting more and more seriously worried. Emma was now very vulnerable to hunters. She's a healthy moose and she could be their main target. Every time she's leaving, Plukas wishes he could do something to make her stay. He really felt he was a real father and he was responsible for Emma's safety. Thus, he thought of the way of keeping his daughter from the dangers of the wild. Plukas couldn't just sit by and watch, waiting for his daughter to come home again and just hoping for the best. He needed to do his duty as a father and a friend, and thus executed his plan. It was a very risky plan to call local hunters and ask for their cooperation. They never thought that they'd receive this kind of invitation for a one-of-a-kind favor. Plukas really didn't know how to make Emma safe, so he invited them to meet Emma in person. I had some hunters over for them to see her as not just a nice warm steak with potatoes and vegetables, but as a very intelligent and loving animal, he said. Surely, Plukas was hoping for the best but expecting the worst. But what came out as the hunter's decision almost gave him a heart attack. After the incident happened before with Emma and her mother, Plukas had only one picture of hunters in his mind. He never thought that he'd hear these words from the hunter's mouth. Plukas was completely in awe as the hunters announced that they would never hurt Emma. He didn't really understand why they came up with the decision, but they could only say one thing. They also saw the deep connection that Plukas and Emma had. Plukas was already very happy that he could be a little at peace when Emma was in the forest because the local hunters agreed not to hurt her. Although he didn't expect that there would be another piece of good news waiting for them just a few days later. One day, good news knocked on their door again. A number of hunters heard their story and they were so touched and moved by it, they decided not to hunt Emma and altogether stop hunting all the wild moose in this forest. Plukas was perfectly happy for Emma and all the moose. He didn't know that his bond with Emma would create such a big impact. Plukas thought he was already so happy with all the good things that were happening, but he didn't know that he would feel even more joy when he noticed something about Emma. She looked a bit bigger than usual and there was something different about her, and these things only point to one thing. Plukas couldn't believe it when he realized his daughter was actually pregnant. He was going to be an animal grandfather. With Emma happily running in his backyard, healthy and very pregnant, Plukas didn't even notice he was smiling in pure euphoria. Never in his life he had become this happy and content until he met Emma. He never thought that saving Emma would actually result in a series of precious things and memories he never could have dreamt of. He felt euphoric as he remembered where his wonderful story had started. Plukas saved Emma's life and now she already had a life inside her womb. But then it wasn't just all about what he did for Emma. Plukas was deeply thankful that her daughter came into his life too. I'm her world now and she's mine. Sometimes I wonder, was it me who saved her or was it the other way around? Looks like Lithuanian men are real wildlife heroes. Aside from Erikas Plukas, another humble Lithuanian man, Darius Sasnaukas, was able to save another animal from the wild. Maybe they have a certain connection with nature, or maybe they're just a really good pair of people. Darius was living on the very top of the Yellowstone National Park, a famous park in the northwest of the United States. Known for being a home to hundreds of species of wild animals like wolves, bears, antelopes, bison, elk, and of course, deer. Seeing wild animals up close is just a part of Sasnaukas's everyday life. But one day he saw something unusual he couldn't ignore. We couldn't deny the fact that nature has its own way of dealing with things, and us humans could really do nothing about it. However, Sasnauskas wanted to prove everyone wrong. That day, Darius saw a deer family passing through the forest. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but something caught his attention. One of the fawns was walking very slowly and her belly was covered in blood. He couldn't look away as the poor fawn was being left by his family. Darius realized that the unfortunate fawn must have been born that very same day, and the reason she was walking slowly was because of the injury on her front leg. He felt sad for the fawn's condition, especially when minutes later, she was completely left all alone by the herd. Darius couldn't walk for a minute because the fawn was all he could think of. She was in a very bad state and not even her mother knew she was already left all alone. The question kept popping up in his mind, how could the poor deer survive? He was meters away from the baby deer and he knew that the moment he left the fawn behind, she would have to face all sorts of danger by herself. She was a newborn, she wasn't even aware of the word surviving and had an injured leg. She couldn't even run when predators would try to capture her. Her chances of survival were tiny. Luckily, that tiny saved the poor fawn. I do not support keeping wild animals as pets, but this was a special situation. Without any second thoughts, Darius grabbed the young doe and headed back to his home. After all those fact checks about the chances of survival, Darius knew he needed to take action immediately before any predators could see her. The moment they got home, Darius's pets welcomed them with pure curiosity, but he had to treat her leg before anything else. The fawn was too young and he couldn't bear to see that she'd already had a serious injury. After healing her wounds, Darius could clearly see how weak the unfortunate fawn was. She looked starving, and so Darius tried to give her some food. As she ate, he was able to observe her every move, and that's where he realized, just like any domestic animal, this baby deer needed a lot of attention and care. She wasn't even a day old, so Darius put all of his attention to her. Darius wanted to make her feel comfortable in her new environment. Luckily, even his pets were very warm and welcoming, though the fawn was a very strange guest indeed. Just like any other newborn child, Darius knew that it was very important for the baby deer to feel secure and warm. Thus, he decided to sleep beside her all week. The deer looked very comfortable on Darius's t-shirt as he sat up in his bed. He found it very touching that the fawn would never actually sleep if it wasn't on his shirt. The moment he saved her, he automatically felt a connection between him and the baby fawn, and as he took care of her, he found himself very proud and happy of his decision to bring her home and mend her. The fawn, on the other hand, seemed to feel the same way, as she also showed how she adored her new mommy. Darius really loved the deer, and he was never lonely as he could see that the deer loved him as well. Darius couldn't help but laugh every time he saw the fawn tailing him everywhere he went, like he was her real mother. She was still regaining her strength, but she never wanted to be away from him. It was just a few days that they spent time together, but they were already father and daughter as well. Both of them were absolutely inseparable since they met. Although Darius was an animal lover with his own cats and dogs, it was still very different and strange to take care of a deer. He really didn't know who to call, so he decided to ask the one who had an answer for everything, the internet. He was living alone with only his dog and cat for so long, so he had no one to ask about the fawn. Plus, he was totally clueless on how to raise a fawn. So thankfully, there's the internet. I had to do some internet searches and was reading to be able to understand how to raise a fawn, getting up at night to feed her every 4 hours and clean her after. Thanks to the internet, Darius got the idea to create a special brace for the baby fawn's injured leg. From an oatmeal box, he created a splint that would support her leg. After several tries, she was able to walk and could be clearly seen that she was happy she could walk again. A precious moment for the both of them, but aside from her body that's starting to heal, it was truly a gift that they were able to create a connection and a bond like a real family. The baby deer must have been so lovable that even Darius's pets fell in love with her. However, it wasn't just her family that adored her so much. While playing outside, the deer found another friend. Mac, a Bernese mountain dog, lived in the area where Darius lived, and as soon as he spotted the baby deer, his paternal instincts quickly turned on. He didn't just accept her as a friend, but he felt as if she were his own puppy. Darius was really happy that the fawn grew close with everyone else. Within a few days, Mac could never stop licking the fawn's face. With all the attention, love, and care she was receiving, the baby fawn was just a little steps away from full recovery. Darius would prepare her food and feed her, while Mac made himself responsible for cleaning her up. When playing outside, Mac was always just at her back while Darius was watching them from on his front porch. And with just a few days, finally their most awaited day came. The baby deer could finally, energetically walk again. Darius was really happy since the baby deer showed up. His family felt like it came back to life when she came into his humble abode. She brought smiles and happiness even to his other pets. However, he was scared of something. Darius's family really adored her, but he was scared the fawn would find it very hard to go back to the wild because of her deep attachment. Thus, he thought of a wonderful plan to make it easier for everyone. Darius planned to let go of the baby fawn and let her back into the wild once he was sure she recovered. He knew that the herd passed by their area in the evenings, and he was trying to find good timing to release her because he perfectly knew that no matter how happy they were together, her real mother's love and care was beyond incomparable. When Darius thought the fawn could finally make it on her own, he decided to bring her outside their house every evening, hoping that she would run back to the herd once she saw them. However, it didn't come easily. No matter how many times Darius let her go, the baby deer always found her way back to him. Then he realized she might not be really ready for the wild, but he didn't give up. It was really hard for him too, but he knew it was the best for the baby doe to learn how to grow in the wild. And then something amazing came. After 2 weeks of bringing her outside and trying to release her into the wild every night, a miraculous night came. They met the baby deer's mother. It didn't really sink into Darius's mind, but the baby deer had already leapt up and joined her mom's herd. He couldn't hide his happiness as he saw the baby deer looking excited and thrilled. It felt as though all his hard work paid off. The baby deer's reunion with her mother was a really magical moment, not just for them, but for Darius too. His heart was truly overjoyed, especially when the fawn ran straight up to the mom the moment she saw her. He couldn't believe that he was able to raise a fawn successfully and witness this special moment. With that moment, everything came rushing back to him. He felt like it was just yesterday when he found her helpless and almost lying on the ground due to weakness and her injury. And now he was watching her jump with joy as she reunited with her real mother. Despite everyone's belief that wild animals should never be taken care of in domestic situations, Darius proved it wrong. That night, he'd also realized he had managed to successfully rehabilitate a wild animal. After seeing that she was happy to return to the wild, he felt he'd just done great work. He might be a little nervous and doubtful at first that she wouldn't be able to go back into the wild, but in the end, it worked. I really hope that she didn't get attached to me too much because that would make it very hard for her to survive in the wild. The fulfillment he felt when she successfully and happily returned to the wild is way up in the clouds. However, the moment she was gone with her family inside the forest, Darius remembered the important thing. They'd forgotten to teach her the basics of survival. Darius and Mac couldn't hide their worry about the fawn they'd taken care of several months before. They could only hope that the protection she had from the herd was enough to keep her safe. After the beautiful reunion of the adorable fawn and her family, Darius only worried about the dangers of the wild she might encounter. Although the herd is always passing by his place, he never expected to see her again. He knew that she would grow up soon and he wouldn't recognize her among the herd, but destiny found a way to prove him wrong. After a few months of only being able to pray for her safety, she jumped right back to him. Darius was speechless as he saw a sense of recognition from her. Again, he felt very proud that she was once his daughter and she's now happily living the life she needs. Knowing that she's fine was all he needed to continue and go on with his life. Darius shared his moments with a baby deer on his social media account. However, he never expected that their story would reach and touch the hearts of thousands of people. Everyone loved how much they adored each other in every photo. Happiness was very evident in their eyes, and although she was a wild animal, there was no sign of worry. Although it wasn't just Darius, people also loved the fact that his pets were perfectly comfortable with a baby deer. The pets playing with one another were probably one of the most adorable scenes you could ever imagine. In the end, people eventually had fallen in love with their amazing family. Darius also shared a story to raise awareness about nature and wildlife. He went on sharing videos on his YouTube channel on how he took good care of the baby deer. He wanted to show people the importance and the big impact wildlife rehabilitation had, especially to the animals. Darius was really thankful that people had appreciated all his efforts. He just hoped that he'd also inspired some others to take action when there are people or even animals that need their help. Who knows, it might change your life too. I didn't expect this story to become so popular. I'm sure that any of us with a little bit of conscience about our existence, with love for nature and animals, would do the same, he said. Never in his whole life had Darius imagined that he would become the savior or father of a wild animal. Darius was just used to seeing them live every single day, but he never thought that he'd be able to get attached with them in his whole life. However, after meeting the poor little doe, he was very thankful that he's the lucky one who saw her. Technically, he saved her, but she turned his world upside down and made him feel more alive than ever. He spent a lot of sleepless nights taking care of the baby deer. It felt like he had his own newborn child. Darius really felt tired at the end of every day, feeding, bathing, and playing with her, but it was all worth it. He never regretted any moment he spent with her. With the baby deer, Darius was given the chance to be a mother and a father. He wasn't asking for her, but she gave him the best moments of his life. She was his miracle.